What is up, guys? I'm Cells Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, here to educate you on health, fitness, social well-being. And today, once again, I will be answering your questions. Thank you to every single one of you who took the time out of your day about 2 days ago to leave a question on the Instagram post. Just so those of you who aren't already know, follow me on Instagram, because that's where I usually, post pictures being like, hey guys, I'm about to do a Q&A. Leave a question down below, unless it's one of the, rare exceptions where I just do it through a YouTube video. I'm like, hey guys, leave your questions down below in this video. But usually I do it on Instagram. But with that being said, all the questions are timestamped down below as always. And as you guys know we do, if it's a question that's related to a topic I've done a full video over, I will have the link in the description. I'll have the link to the video in the description next to the question that is time-stamped. Dog, go on, man. Time-stamped. I can't talk right now. Let's just get to answer. Boy, what? Let's answer your questions. All right, guys, first question. If you're skinny fat, should you bulk or cut? All right, guys, so more often than not, if you're skinny fat, you're almost 9 times out of 10, you're a beginner. Because if you're actually like, an intermediate or advanced lifter, you've been actually lifting correctly with correct nutrition, you built a sufficient amount of muscle, then usually you don't have the problem being skinny fat. You're either gonna be pretty lean, or you're probably like, you're pretty muscular, but you may have more fluff on you than what you want, in which case, of course, you simply like, cut down to a nice lean frame, then go into a lean mass phase. But if you're skinny fat and more than likely a beginner like I'm suggesting, then the best thing that you can do is to simply stay at maintenance and focus on progression in the gym. Meaning, make sure you're hitting your adequate protein, make sure that you're taking in maintenance level calories, but then focus on getting stronger in the gym. Because as a beginner, you're gonna be able to body recomp, which means you're gonna be able to build muscle, but also burn a little bit of fat at the same time. So either, you can be in a very slight deficit if you just really feel like you have more fat on you than what you really like. But I think just staying at maintenance and getting strong in the gym, you're gonna start to see those changes that you want, because as you start building more muscle mass and you're staying at maintenance, as your muscle mass goes up, your fat will go down. And then, by the end of your first 2 years, you'll have a nice little base to work with. And from there, you can decide, okay, now I think I'll do a little cut to get the little remainders of this fat that's on me off, or you can decide to go into a lean mass phase or a lean bulk, whichever you prefer to call it. But yeah, next question. Why did you choose the certifications that you have? All right, so for those of you who don't know, I'm certified through AFA, that's the Aerobic Fitness Association of America, and I also have a degree in kinesiology. Simply put, man, the reason that I got a degree in kinesiology is because that's like just what I decided I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to have a career in health, fitness, whether it was corporate fitness, coaching, personal training at my junior year in college. That's the point where I decided that's what I wanted to do. Before that, my first 2 years, I was actually an engineer major, but as I kept getting deeper in the classes, even though I did really well with them, I realized, man, I'm good at this, but I don't enjoy it. It's just not fun for me. So health and fitness is something that I've always been into, something I've always enjoyed, doing. So it just made sense to go in that direction. In terms of the certification, at the end of the day, the certification doesn't really make or break you. It's important to have, but what's really gonna matter is your knowledge base that you build, on top of your certification. But the reason I went with that is because like AFA, NASM, NCSA, and like what's another, like Cooper Institute, those are all just like pretty well recognized certifications, so you can pretty much get a job training anywhere if that's what you choose to do as far as that. But that's just the one that came with the scholarship that I got, because through the weight room that I was working at the UNT Rec Center where I was going to college, they offered like basically scholarships. Were like, hey, you sign up, you write out this essay, tell us why we should like consider you to take the free course, get the free certification, all that stuff. I've explained this in past videos before, but yeah, that's pretty much why I ended up with that certification. It wasn't just like, oh, I just really want this specific certification. It was just like, okay, it's a good, credible certification, so that works for me. Next question, have you ever considered doing stand-up? I'm assuming this refers to stand-up comedy. Those of you who only follow me on YouTube, well, it's not, if you follow me on YouTube, but you've seen, because you guys, I don't usually do like the daily vlog stuff unless it's like a special trip or something like that. So if you've seen any of those videos, or if you follow me on Instagram, you see me on my story, you probably know why he's asking that. I guess sometimes people find like when I get upset about stuff, or my rants and the way I kind of like vented and stuff like that, to be comical. I guess that's why he's asking that. No, it's something I've ever really considered, man, but you know what? Always gotta have a backup plan. Always gotta have a backup plan. If I just one day to say, screw it, I'm tired of training, I don't care about coaching, bump YouTube, then maybe I just go on the road, boy. Make people laugh, boy. I can be pretty funny, boy. No, I'm just playing. Anyway, next question. What was your favorite class in college that didn't have to do with your major? My guess is philosophy. Oh, man, that is a good question. Honestly, bro, if I had to be real, my favorite class that didn't have to do with my major was probably human sexuality. Just because like even though that does have to do like, you know, with health to a certain degree, it was an elective. It didn't have to do with my direct coursework or anything like that. But it's just really interesting, man, because like you learn about everything kind of involved in sex. You learn about different stuff that went on in the past, stuff that's going on now. You just learn about like how people kind of react socially because of it. It was a really interesting class, bro, and like, you know, it helps put you on game, if you know what I mean. Anyway, next question. 38, fat swole, definitely let my body fat get out of hand. I usually do body part splits because I just love to train that way. Would it benefit me more to do full body? Always enjoy your content. All right, man, so if your problem is simply, it sounds like your main problem is like your body fat percentage, that has nothing to do with what type of split you're on. More than anything, that comes down to making sure you're in a caloric deficit and make sure that you simply, like, you know, start losing weight, start burning that fat. And, you know, once again, like I said, I'll have my video over the topic as a whole. Like, I think it's like the 6 tips for cutting. That will probably help you out a lot. Go ahead and check that out. It'll be in the timestamp question down below. But yeah, man, how, like, it's not like, oh, push-pull legs versus upper lower versus full body is gonna like just like burn so many more calories to where it's gonna really help you with your cut. Ultimately, if you're not in a deficit, it doesn't matter. I will say with full body training, since it is full body and since the frequency is almost always higher than, especially on a bro split, you are going to be more active, and that can definitely help you with being in a caloric deficit. And there's lots of other reasons as to why, like, you know, full body, or really anything, full body, push pull legs or upper lower, is way more like, you know, optimal than a bro split. But I'll have, you know, a link to a video for that in the description down as well. But yeah, man, you just need to be in a caloric deficit regardless of what type of split you're on. Next question, any tips on getting bigger biceps faster? Nah, man, listen, ultimately, everyone's muscles grow at a different rate genetically. Some people, your chest may blow up really fast. Other people, maybe your back, maybe your legs, maybe your biceps. But the key to growth for any muscle group is the same across the board. Make sure that you're training with sufficient total workload, making sure that you are progressively overloading with that workload. So over time, you're adding, you know, either sets, reps, weight, and make sure you're able to properly recover from that workload, because if you can't recover, then it's kind of pointless. And then make sure that you're eating enough to support all of that, the growth, the work, the training, the recovery, all that kind of stuff. So the only way you can make it faster is maybe if you've been training around maintenance, then start training in a surplus, because obviously that's going to help you to grow faster than if you're just training at maintenance. And then making sure that you're putting an emphasis on your compound movements. Of course, make sure, you know, do your curls, but, you know, heavy rows, weighted pull-ups, lat pull-downs, all of those back movements, those are going to put a pretty significant load on your biceps as well. So make sure you're prioritizing that, and then using, you know, bicep curls as needed, an accessory to that. Next question, who's your favorite pump chasers athlete? Man, this is a trick, total complete trick. Me, I'm my favorite. No, but in all seriousness, I'd have to say from a content perspective, it's gonna have to go to my homegirl Maria, for the mere fact that she, out of everyone, excluding your boy, if I may say so myself, is the most consistent with, you know, uploading quality content to YouTube. And I just feel like the fitness industry needs more women who are actually trying to upload quality content instead of all of the other BS that a lot of them do. So yeah. Next question, what are some common signs of overtraining? All right, so there's a few. I'll be honest, like, so overtraining, as I've explained before, and I'll have my video over this description as below as well, but like overtraining is a real thing. It's not something that's really easy to do, but it is a real thing. And just be clear, I'm not talking about overtraining the way that Mike Rashid talks about it. Like when Mike Rashid says things like, oh, I'm trying to bring overtraining back, blah, 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 like really he's talking about progressive overload, right? Because all he says is, hey, you always gotta push, you always gotta push them, so always gotta train a little bit harder than you did last time. Well, that's literally just progressively overloading. If you did a little bit more weight than last time, more sets, more reps, that's progressive overloading. That's not overtraining, but like I said, the video will explain what overtraining actually is. But some common symptoms of that, guys, are gonna be like, okay, if you just like have hit a plateau on everything, not just 1 or 2 lifts, but like you're not getting stronger on any of your lifts, and then you actually start getting weaker, you start regressing, that can be a sign of overtraining. If you're having trouble sleeping, that can be a sign of overtraining. And then there's also like little tests that people supposedly say you can do. I'm not sure about like how much, like, you know, actual research behind it, but things like your grip strength, like when you find that your grip strength is giving out way more than, like, a lot faster than what it usually does on different movements, whether it's deadlifts or rows, whatever, that can also be a possible sign of overtraining. But yeah, just check the video out and it'll go into more details of that based off things that have actually been like proven by research. All right, next question. Do you do any self-improvement other than the gym, such as meditation or reading? If you read, what are some books you would recommend? All right, man, so definitely, like, I believe, and no disrespect to anybody who kind of, I guess, is like this, but there has to be more to your life than just lifting weights, right? Like that can be what you're passionate about, what you really enjoy, which obviously that's the case for me. But I'm a big believer in not putting all my eggs in one basket, not just in terms of like, you know, career or finances, but in terms of just like being a well-developed, well-balanced person. I believe that, you know, it's the more you can learn, the more stuff you get involved in, the better. So I don't necessarily do like, you know, a lot of like meditation in the sense of like you know, the yoga stuff like the or anything like that. No, but like but I am a Christian, so I do believe like, you know, like in prayer and like thinking about just life as a whole. Like, you know, I read the Bible, I read different philosophical books, things like that. And in general, I like to read a variety of things. So like you know, if we're talking about like oh, what's your favorite fictional genre, that's different. But I mean, like I like reading things on politics, I like reading things over sociology and like kind of how society works. I like reading different things over psychology, seeing like why people do the things they do. I like to learn as much as I can about as many different areas as I can, so that way, one, I can be able to relate to more people and talk to more people about different topics in general, you know, whether it's like philosophy, politics, religion, whatever it may be. And also just because I feel like it helps me to be a better, more well-rounded person as a whole. Like, you know, they say knowledge is power, and I am a huge believer in that, not just in the sense of like, oh, the more you know, like the more you can do success-wise, but like the more you know, the more people you can connect with. That is power in and of itself. So yeah, but yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I definitely do other forms of self-improvement than just like lifting weights. Next question, what are the differences between the different powerlifting federations, USAPL, AAU, NASA, etc.? Also, why did you choose the one you're currently competing? All right, so the main difference, guys, between most of the powerlifting federations, as far as I know, is pretty much just like little basic rules here and there. Like for example, the USAPL, you have to have your feet completely flat, whereas in some other federations you can be up on your toes. And the USAPL, like if you're benching, your head has to be, you know, back against the bench. You can't like have your head come up. And in some other federations, I believe you can. And then like equipment, like I think in some federations you can like use like an actual deadlift bar versus a stiff bar. And then of course, like, you know, some federations are drug tested and some aren't. That does not mean that just because you're in a non-drug tested federation that you're automatically on drugs. And I promise you, everyone in the USAPL is probably not natural either, but it just means that they actually try to test for it. So you probably have less people on stuff in the USAPL than other federations, but I can't even say that for sure. Maybe people are just really good at playing the system. But those are the main differences. And the only reason I picked the USAPL is because when I first started powerlifting 2 years ago, I was going to college at UNT. I helped start and, you know, join and create the UNT powerlifting team, and that is the federation that the people who had already had powerlifting experience like were with. So that's just the one that I went with. There was no reason other than that. Next question, how do you go about increasing volume in a mesocycle? More sets, reps, or both? All right, so for those of you who don't know, pretty much the way it works like with cycles, your macro cycle is pretty much like a planned year of training, right? Your mesocycles can be anywhere from like, you know, a few weeks to a few months. Usually they're about a month. And then a microcycle is like, you know, 7 days, like that's like a week of training. And basically, man, it's gonna depend on how your programming is set up, and what type of periodization you're using as well. Like some people, it'll be like, you know, an increase in reps. Other people will be an increase in sets. And then for some people, there's even like, you know, increases in weights and stuff like that as well. And it also depends on like what you're doing. Is what's the mesocycle focused on? Are you focused on strength, hypertrophy, or some other aspect like movement preparation, etc.? So that's gonna have a huge impact. It's kind of a very broad question, but for me personally, usually when the volume's like getting increased in some form or another, more often than not, it comes in the form of reps and weight for me, usually. Sometimes it's sets too, but once again, it just depends. And plus I've ran different programs, I've been on different programs, so it kind of just depends. But so long as there's some type of volume increase, that's the main thing that's important for all of your cycles collectively. All right, next question, are those that take test boosters still natty? So it depends on what we're talking about, man. So first of all, majority of test boosters are a waste of time and a waste of money, for the mere fact that you guys have to understand, I know a lot of enhanced lifters have skewed this because people will be like, oh yeah, this enhanced lifter was on like, you know, 60,000 milligrams of tests, or, you know, like whatever arbitrary number you want to use, like just a whole bunch of tests, and like look at how it changed their physique. But you guys have to understand about test boosters that the majority of them don't take you out of your normal like hormone level range as far as testosterone. So basically you guys have to keep this in mind, that like your hormone levels all kind of work on a range. So for testosterone, let's say this is like, you know, the range is right here. Well, even if you drop down a little bit in that range, that's not going to suddenly just destroy your muscle mass or give you a huge decrease in strength. And in the same way, if this is the range and you're right here and you go up a little bit due to taking something like test boosters, you're not going to see any results from that. Like all the science and research and evidence shows that you're not going to get any type of muscle mass or performance benefits from doing that. Now, with that being said, if you take it so natural, like, yeah, but like, why? It's pointless, it's stupid. Now, if you're like on like, you know, some super physiological stuff, like some huge amounts of testosterone, where like I said, this is the range, and it's like having you blast through that, well then obviously at that point, no, you're not natural, because you're going far beyond what your body would be able to do on its own in terms of like, you know, testosterone production. And that's like where the, you know, the skewed perception of like, oh, testosterone does all this for you. Yes, it does, but only beyond like your actual normal range. My next question, how long have you been bodybuilding / powerlifting? You don't weigh a lot, but you were super big and still lean. Feel like I'm like, oh, thank you so much, man. I don't think I'm that big, but I appreciate it. Anyway, so like, I'm not a bodybuilder, but I assume you just mean like, how long have I been weight training? So I've been powerlifting for 2 years. I think it'll be 3 years in November of this year. But in terms of lifting weights, I've been lifting weights for 6 years, going on 7. It'll also be like around 7 years at the end of this year. And before that, I was training with like calisthenics. So I trained with calisthenics, like bodyweight stuff, you know, push-ups, pull-ups, bodyweight squats, all that kind of stuff, from age 11 all the way to 17. Then continued on with that, in addition to lifting weights, starting at age 17, and now I'm 24. So with that being said, like, you have to keep in mind, for one, a lot of it has to do with not just how long you've been training, but how you've been training. I know a lot of people have been lifting just as long as me, if not longer, who don't necessarily look the way that I do. One, just genetics, right? Obviously, like the way you look and like, you know, how fast you put on muscle mass, stuff like that, like, and how much muscle mass you put on, a lot of that is genetic. But the reality is, let's say we have 2 people like with very quote unquote similar genetics or whatever. If both of them have been lifting for 3 years, but one was training correctly, you know, with proper nutrition, proper programming as far as adequate volume, progressive overload, all that jazz, and the other person was just, you know, BSing around, just trying to get a good pump every workout, but had no structure to what he was doing for 3 years, then obviously the one who had the more structure and was training correctly is gonna look a lot better than the other person. So that's all it comes down to, man. Like, make sure that, you know, you train smart, and just as the years go by, you'll start seeing the results. It doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna look like me or anybody else, of course, like, you know, your genetics or your genetics, but you'll have more optimal results if you have more optimal training. That's just kind of common sense. Question, is your family a bunch of fitness enthusiasts? If not, what are some other things that you and your family are into? So, are we fitness enthusiasts? I would say that as of right now, the only like just straight, you know, fitness enthusiasts, you know, like just all about lifting, loving, working out, all that kind of stuff, it's probably me. But my family has always been like very physically active. Like, my dad is the one that got me into like, you know, working out my body weight and helped me get into lifting weights and like that. And he still does work out. Like, I think for a period of time he stopped lifting weights and focused more just on maintaining with calisthenics, but now he's gotten back into lifting weights again. My mom, you know, she stays active. She goes like for walks, stuff like that. She gets workouts in either, you know, from me or my dad, whenever she has the time to do so. And then like my big brother, who was in the Marines for like 9 years, he's one of the big influences I had with going from calisthenics just to weights, because I saw what weights did for him. So he works out. One of my sisters, she's on scholarship at UNT, where I graduated from, running track. So it's like, yeah, we're all like big into like, you know, just health and being physically active in some form, shape, or another. But as far as like the whole, what people think of as a fitness enthusiast, that's probably more so me. But as far as the things that we like to do for fun, man, like we all like, you know, like we like superhero movies and stuff like that. We like watching just different shows, different comedies. We, you know, like we're all like, pretty much like I answered the previous question, like we're all pretty well-rounded individuals. But as far as things we like to do like as a family, I guess we actually all have the time to like get together, like, you know, like to go out, eat, go see a movie, watch different shows, watch comedies, things like that. Next question incoming, most real question ever. If you could do a Dragon Ball Z type fusion with anyone in the world, who would it be and why? Earrings stuck forever fusion, not the 30-second fusion dance. Dang, that is, oh, excuse me, that is hard, man. That's tough. That's permanent, right? Like if I remember correctly, like with the earrings, that's like forever. That's like forever, man. Nah, that's tough. See, I'm not gonna see. A lot of you probably think I'm gonna say somebody like my boy Derek or Russell like that. See, I'm not just thinking about from the perspective of lifting though. Like other stuff goes into it. If I had to do that with anyone, bro, y'all don't judge me, hear me out. It would probably be like Justin Bieber, because what my hope would be is that, like, you know, we keep my body and physique and hopefully my brain, but we get like, you know, his singing talent and all of his money. Because if I do that, like, it's game over, bro. Like I'll have everything I could ever want, everything I could ever need, bro. I'm solid. So yeah, we gotta do that with JB. Hey, JB, if you watching this, if you watching this, bro, think about it, bro. Think about it. Next question, can you talk about how to eat for mass while being a college student? I find it hard to eat a surplus of healthy foods. It's usually one or the other. Eat healthy foods, but not enough to gain lean mass, or eat the surplus of top ramen and tuna, but not very healthy. Can you answer, please? Love your content. Appreciate that, man. All right, so first thing you have to understand, dude, is that you kind of have to get away from the typical ideas of what people have taught you as like you know, healthy foods and unhealthy foods. Like just give you a little example. People are so quick to say like, oh, processed foods are bad for you, but they don't even sit and think about what that means. Like a processed food literally just means that you're taking a food from one form and turning it into another. So if you take a bunch of fruits, right, and vitamins and like, you know, protein or whatever, no one's gonna think that's unhealthy. But guess what? If you mix that all together in a shake or a blender, you just processed it. That is now a processed food, but it's not suddenly unhealthy for you. So the kind of key is understanding that, especially when you're trying to gain a lot of weight, you have to be smart with like what food you're eating. I'm not telling you just to go and eat a bunch of like, you know, McDonald's all the time, but the big thing is not so much like, oh, you're eating too much of this, but just make sure you're not skipping out on your micronutrition. So if you have one meal, like fast food meal where you're eating out to help you with your calories and your macros, and then you kind of eat the rest of your meals, home cooked meals at home, around those calories and macros to make sure you're hitting everything, I think that's a lot more effective than just trying to force feed yourself nothing but like, you know, chicken and rice and like sweet potatoes, right? Like that's gonna be difficult. Like that's the main thing, guys. A lot of people have health issues, not because, oh, I mean, yeah, obviously if you overeat like certain things, that's gonna be a problem, but it's not, oftentimes it's not that you ate this and oh, your body is like destroyed. It's the fact that you're eating so much of that stuff to where you're neglecting eating some things that you do need for micronutrition, health, stuff like that. So just keep that balance. Make sure you're covering both your macro and your micronutrition, and that's gonna make like just like a huge difference. But also keep in mind, like in college, I understand that, I've been there. Sometimes you're gonna have to just take the L and eat that Whataburger or eat that McDonald's, or like, you know, unless you want to like, you know, make a bunch of smoothies and meal prep and things like that. But it's one of those things where it can be hard to do on the go. So it's just having that balance. Like, don't have all your meals be like fast food. I'm not telling you to do that, but don't be afraid to throw that stuff in there if it's gonna help you with gaining weight and gaining muscle mass. Next question, what do you do for a living? Are you a personal trainer? Yes, so as far as like, you know, outside of just like, you know, online training and you know, the programming, all that kind of stuff, I'm a personal trainer for like people in person as well. Like I have in-person clients as well. And then, you know, I also do coaching for like the USAPL. So I have like, you know, people who I coach for powerlifting meets in the same federation that I'm also in. Next question, what are your views on reverse pyramid training? I pretty much addressed this in my video where I talked about like supersets and drop sets, because to me it all kind of like, even though it's different, it all kind of goes hand in hand. I believe that things like, you know, straight sets and focusing on proper progression with your movements and stuff like that, that's gonna be a lot better. Whatever's gonna allow you to utilize more total workload, it's gonna be better. If you're someone where you're going in there and you're just doing a whole bunch of like, you know, pyramiding and reverse pyramiding and stuff like that, it makes it a lot harder to actually track where you're progressing. Like, okay, well, what do you focus on progressing on? Like the very first set or the very last set, so in the middle, where do you focus on that progressive overload? And on top of that, like, even though I think it could be a fun way to train, and I think it's a tool that can be utilized. I'm not one of these people who thinks like, oh, you gotta superset to build muscle, you gotta do drop sets to build muscle, you have to reverse pyramid to build muscle, because it's just not the case. It's not true. I think there are things that can, you know, be decent tools when properly utilized. But if you look at a lot of like the best, like, you know, strength coaches out there, a lot of like the best programs done for like hypertrophy, stuff like that. I'm not talking about by just, you know, your run-the-mill YouTuber, but like actual like professionals where like, you know, that's how they make their living and that's like what they study, what school for, stuff like that. A lot of them aren't throwing in a bunch of stuff like that, like as the base anyway. There may be some of it here and there, but it's not like the main focus is like all reverse pyramid sets and things of that nature. So that's kind of my take on that. Next question, I know you follow Dr. Mike Israel's work as well. When you do block periodization, a strength block in particular, how do you go about progression? For strength, intensity is a greater contributor than volume, but is it efficient to also add sets as well from week to week along with loads? That's appreciated. So this is kind of similar to the other question, guys, and what's about like, you know, how do you set up a macro cycle? And once again, it's gonna depend on what your programming is like. Like, okay, are you doing straight like block linear periodization? Are you doing block periodization but with DUP involved? Are you just doing actual just straight like concurrent training DUP? A lot of that is going to depend and vary based upon what you're doing, but the reality is you can build strength without always increasing intensity all the time. Because the thing is, if you're constantly trying to increase intensity too much, that can cause you to, like, you know, crash and break down. You can only go so high with that threshold. But at the same time, if you're someone where you're just overloading with volume, it can be a problem too. So it just, once again, it depends. The way that it usually goes with me is that there's usually like if I'm working with a certain amount like of volume, right, there will be a gradual increase in intensity after that. And then the volume will kind of go up using that same intensity for a while. And then from there, bump the intensity up again and then build the volume up around it as well. So that's kind of the way that I've gone about it, depending on how it's set up. And once again, it depends on like what the person's goals are, who I'm working with, and if we're just talking about me in particular. But in general, and that's the thing, you can't really separate like, okay, if the intensity goes up, the volume is going up too. So that's kind of the real answer. Like it's both, because think about it, like 3 sets of 10 with 200 pounds is less volume than 3 sets of 10 with 300 pounds, right? So if you increase the intensity, then the volume is being increased as well, regardless. So it's pretty much both. Next question, have you watched The Punisher on Netflix? Yes, I did. Absolutely loved it. Like from the first episode, I could just tell, okay, it's starting off a little bit slow, but I can tell it's like gonna get good. So really enjoyed it. And then let's see, in addition, what were the 4 jobs you worked during college and how did you balance your time? So in college, I was fortunate enough to where all my jobs were pretty much on campus. So I was a head supervisor of the weight room at the UNT Rec Center. I was a personal trainer. I was a teacher's assistant for a sports and sociology class and an introduction to kinesiology class. And then I was also a tutor. And as far as balancing my time, it wasn't so much about just balance so much as it was priorities. Like going to those jobs was a straight necessity for me. Like if I was trying to avoid taking out a bunch of student loans, be able to eat, have bills, it was a necessity. So those always got prioritized first. Like those were put in my schedule wherever they need to be. And then of course, you know, classes, also priority, that's set up where it needs to be. And then I just structured everything else around it. So like, you know, as far as like having time to do homework, I would set that as time, as like classwork time as well. So once, you know, my schedule for the week is set up as far as like what I'm doing, as far as my jobs, as far as classes, any free time I had, that's where I would like start dedicating things like, okay, well, I'm gonna work out at this time on this day, or you know, if I have some time, I'll go hang out with my friends for like a little bit on this day. But for me, there wasn't a whole lot of just like fun free time really until maybe like my last semester, when I could finally like ease up a little bit. A lot of it was work. I had plenty of days where I was going from like, you know, waking up at 5 in the morning to be at my first job by 6 in the morning, and then by the time my day is done with all my classes, my works, my workouts, it's midnight. But that was just kind of part of the grind. So a lot of my dedicated free time would go to things like I said, my workouts, studying, sleeping. That's a big thing. I did make sure I still got enough sleep, but it's just one of those things, guys, you have to understand, you're not always gonna be able to have the perfect quote unquote balance you want. It's always gonna be like, oh, I've got 50% fun, 50% work. No, sometimes you're just gonna have to go through periods of times where you work, and then once that period of time is over, you can kind of have a little bit more balance in your life. But that's pretty much how that worked for me, man. I just had to be organized and plan my weeks out. I couldn't just go day to day hoping that, oh, I hope everything lines up the way I want to. No, I had to plan when I was gonna do stuff. Next question, why did you choose kinesiology as a major? Pretty much like I said earlier, it's because it's what I enjoy. Like, so kinesiology is pretty much like, you know, the study of like human movement. It has to do like, you know, with health, fitness, biomechanics, exercise physiology, everything that I talk about on this channel, that's a lot of that what my degree has to do with. And I chose it because it's just what I simply enjoyed. Like I said, originally I was an engineer major, but I didn't enjoy it. Like the classes I was doing, the projects we were working on, even though I did really well with it, because I've always been really good with science and math, I didn't enjoy it. So the way I looked at it was, since I was getting so heavily involved with like fitness and stuff anyway, just like on the side for fun, I was very passionate about it. I'm like, well, why? When I found out that kinesiology was a thing, you could be more than just like a PE coach. No disrespect to anyone who is, because we need good PE coaches, but the fact of the matter is, the moment I found that was a thing, I immediately changed my major, and that was like my junior year. So yeah. Warming up at a powerlifting meet, what percentage of your first attempt do you warm up to? It just depends, man. Like, so for me, my openers aren't anything like crazy heavy. I believe that your opener should be something that you can hit like any day of the week for like sets of 3, period. Like, it just needs to be something to get on the, that you can get on the board. And pretty much I use my openers as just a warm up for my second attempt. So as far as percentages, I guess the last thing I hit before my warm up is maybe something that's like maybe like 90 or 95% of the actual warm up weight. It's probably something close to that. Next question, what is the music genre you listen to while training, driving, etc.? I usually actually don't listen to music while I'm training. I need to get into that habit just because a lot of gyms that I go to, like, the music is garbage, bro. Like, they're playing like all kinds of nonsense that does not get you hyped for the gym at all. But in terms of like just what I listen to when I'm like driving, or if I do so happen to be listening to music, everything. Question, in your opinion, what are the most significant cues that you started a training block with too little or too much intensity? So for me personally, I feel like it's kind of hard to start a training block with too little intensity. What I mean by that is, like, no matter what you start off with, even if you start off kind of relatively light, as you gradually continue on with the progression of the program, the intensity is going to go up anyway. And I think it's actually a little bit better to start a little bit lighter than maybe what you should have. That's definitely better than starting heavier than what you should have. But the reality is, if you're starting off your intensities, let's say it's like strength focused around maybe like, 65, 70%, that's good. Now if you're doing like 50% of your warm-up max, that's probably like bad, but most people aren't gonna make that mistake, and most programs aren't set up that way. As far as too much intensity, that's pretty obvious. Like if it's the first day and then you're like, hey, you're supposed to go do this many sets for this many reps with this, with however much weight that you chose for your intensity, and you weren't able to complete it, like you're already struggling, you already feel like you're hitting plateaus in your first like week to 2 weeks, then you probably start off with too much intensity. Next question, can you get strong, increase the weight you lift, and increase muscle mass while on a cut? So the answer to this is it depends. As far as the muscle mass, if you are someone where you're extremely overweight or extremely obese, then yes, it is possible to still body recomposition, aka build muscle while burning fat while you're in a deficit. But the only reason for that is simply due to the fact that you have so much fat that your body can use energy like that's stored up, to where even though you're in a deficit as far as like the amount you're eating to burn fat, you still have so much energy to where your body can still build muscle, assuming that you're training correctly to like maximize muscle growth. And it's kind of the same thing, like I said, with beginners who are staying at maintenance, but they're still able to kind of like build muscle and burn fat at the same time, or even if they are in a slight deficit, they're able to do that. Now, excluding those two exceptions, usually, no, you're more often than not, you're not going to be able to actually effectively build muscle while you're on a cut, but you can maintain and build strength so long as you are programming correctly and taking the cut very gradually, very slowly. But like I said, the video for that is already addresses this with the same question where I talked about caloric maintenance, so just check that out. Next question, if a train is leaving from Chicago but turns into a submarine in New Mexico, how many pull-ups can you do? All of them. Next question, what is another big passion of yours besides fitness? So I guess it depends on what you mean by like passion, man, because like your boy can get passionate about a lot of things. But I guess for me, one of the big things that I'm passionate about, like outside of fitness, is more of like the I guess it kind of relates to fitness too, but it is more of like the social well-being aspect. I'm very passionate about like helping people when it comes to like just like life, things they're dealing with socially. I'm a big believer in helping people learn to be self-validated, so that through that they can deal with all types of problems in their life. I feel like too many people in life, they validate themselves through their circumstances or through like, society standards, this, that, and the third. And I absolutely hate that. Like, I'm blessed to have been raised to understand the importance of self-validation. And I guess you could say like I'm just passionate about helping others to realize the same thing. But if you mean like what my passion about as far as like just like hobbies and stuff, like bro, I'm like any other brother, man. Like I like different sports, bro. Like I like UFC. I like watching two dudes beat the crap out of each other. Your boy watches anime. Your boy's very passionate about his anime. Don't judge me on that. But yeah, man, like I'm passionate about a lot of things. And when should we use a belt if we have correctly learned how to brace our core? So this question, it's gonna depend. If you're a beginner, I don't think you really have any need for a belt at all. I think you need to build a good base of strength, technique, and learn how to brace your core without a belt. But from there, it kind of depends on what endeavors you're going into. If you're a power lifter, then you're probably gonna be using a belt like a lot. I think you should have your belt on for like pretty much all the time when you're doing like, bench, squat, deadlift, unless you are specifically like having phases of like beltless training, which is fine, that's totally okay, but just make sure you know like why you're doing that and how to go about that. If you're not someone who's really into that, you're training more for like body composition, then kind of rule of thumb, you can use your belt when you feel it's needed on your heavier compound movements, just to help you, more effectively progressively overload, etc. But outside of that, like you shouldn't be walking around wearing your belt when you're doing curls and things like that. Next question, do you still do full body workouts? Yes, I do. So what you guys have to understand is there's lots of different ways to go about full body, in the sense of you guys are used to me doing the traditional full body where you're doing like, 1 to 2 movements for each muscle group, and that's focused more like from a hypertrophy standpoint. But a lot of what I have been doing recently is full body, but it's more like movement focused. So I may have a day where like, I'm doing like I start with squats and bench, and those are my main focuses, and then after that I do more like push type accessory work, but I still did full body. You know, I cover my lower body with the squats, cover my upper body with the bench, and then like, you know, some push accessory work. Or if it's a day where I'm doing like deadlifts and then pull work, or, you know, even if it's a day where I'm doing like, you know, like some pin lay rows and then like leg stretch work, things like that. Even though with these days, obviously the accessory work is more focused on one thing than the other. Like my accessory work on one day may focus more on push muscles, and the other day more pull muscles, and the other day more leg muscles. But collectively, the workout as a whole, when you look at the compounds and the isolation work, it's still full body. It's just not the type of full body you guys are used to seeing and doing. How was your first time in the gym? It was alright. Like my first time in a gym, it was actually like at the gym of the fire station that my dad was currently stationed at. So like, it was literally just me and my pops in there. So like, I mean, it was cool. Next question, how heavy do you go on hypertrophy days? As in percent of your 1 RM on the big lifts, number of sets and reps. Once again, it's gonna depend on how your programming is set up. For me personally, if I'm setting up for myself, my hypertrophy days, it'll probably start around like 65%, 65-70% of my 1 rep max. It's probably around where I'm gonna start, and then just over time, you know, that volume will increase, and of course the intensity with that will increase a little bit as well. What was your reason to start lifting? Sports, girls, strength? My reason to start lifting, so if we're talking about working out in general, like I said, that wasn't so much just something I'm like, oh, I really want to work out. It's like my dad was a big believer in, like, you know, intelligent mind and strong body. So like, you know, of course he started me off when I was younger, like make sure that like, you know, I read and everything like that, make good grades, but he also wanted me to be very physically active. So that's how he got me started like with calisthenics. In terms of lifting, the reason I got into lifting was because for the longest time I was someone who thought like, why would I ever need to lift weights? I'm already doing calisthenics, I'm fine. But when I realized from watching my older brother, like just how much bigger and stronger you could get from them weights, oh yeah, that was it, man. That was all the motivation I needed. Like, it was never about, for me, it was never about like even like girls or sections like that. It was just about like, bro, I want to be strong. I want to be able to like move some weight and perform. I want to be able to kill somebody if they come at me crazy. So yeah. Next question, do you know if there is any research out there that shows how inactive one can be before they start to lose muscle? For example, an individual has been working out for 3 months, rest days included, but then goes totally inactive for a week. Will this have a major impact on individual gains? So basically, according to all the research and evidence, you know, that we look at collectively, muscle atrophy, that means like, you know, start losing muscle mass, does not occur until 2 weeks without training. So basically, if you stop working out for 2 weeks, but then you immediately pick back up at the end of those 2 weeks, you won't really see any significant losses in muscle mass or strength or anything like that. So yeah. Hey bro, do you go undergo any type of treatments, for example, massage therapy? And how often would you see someone, or do you go with the self-diagnosis and self-care? Big fan, bro. Love your perspective on the craft. So for me personally, I'm not someone who's against different treatments like that, like, you know, going to the chiropractor, massage therapist, things like that. But I'm also not one of these people who think like, oh, you need to be going to these guys like every single week or even every single month. Not at all. I personally think that if people would go about things the right way, as far as like, you know, proper training, as far as their technique, proper warm-up, focusing on like, you know, their mobility, stretching as needed, things like that, it's gonna help avoid having to do a lot of that. So if you do focus on self-care, it's gonna help avoid having to go to a lot of specialists for this, that, and the third. But with that being said, personally, like I've gone to get like massages like maybe like in my life, like maybe like 4 times, like if that. But in general, like I go with like an as need basis. Like if I feel like this is something I need, or I need to go get checked out or looked at, then I will. But that hasn't ever really been the case. And of course, like, you know, I do believe like, you know, usual checkups, so that way if something's coming up that you maybe didn't realize or notice, you can immediately go get that taken care of. But that's kind of my stance on it. Use that stuff like on an as need basis. And final question, what else is in your fitness routine? Foam rolling, stretching, mobility work, or nothing, just weights? All right, so first of all, if all somebody does is lift weights, like they don't do any type of cardio, they don't do any type of mobility work, or like, you know, warm-ups before their workouts, and they've never stretched a day in their life, then that's not a very, like, that's not, to me, that's not really fitness. Like they are fit in a certain aspect when it comes to like their body's ability to do work, as far as like lifting weights and stuff like that. But for me, that's not really encompassing all of health and fitness and just your overall well-being. So to answer your question, yes, I do. I don't particularly foam roll unless I absolutely like need to, just because, you know, all the research kind of shows that foam rolling, it's not that it's useless. It has its benefits, but it's one of those things where it's like, it's temporary. Like the benefits of what you do with it is temporary, and it can help you for like maybe that session. So of course, over long periods of time, if you use it continuously, that can be beneficial. But for me, I don't really have a whole lot of issues that people do that use foam rolling, as far as like, you know, different tightness and stuff like that. I'm a big believer in like mobility work. So, but the thing is, your mobility work is gonna vary from person to person. That's the thing. A lot of you keep saying like, oh, do a whole video over like your mobility stuff. But the thing is, what I do for my warm-ups, and you guys have seen some of the stuff I do for my warm-ups, like in my workout videos, but doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're gonna be doing. Mobility and warm-ups is very specific to the individual, as far as what you kind of need to get warm, what you need to get activated, what, you know, issues you have with your own personal mobility. And as far as static stretching, I do that on an as-need basis. Like if I feel like I really need to stretch something out at the end, I do so. But I focus more on my dynamic work before working out, just because research has also shown that over years of training, static stretching, you start to have diminished returns with that too. You don't get as much benefit from it, which makes sense if you think about it, right? Because if you're doing correct training and you're kind of going through like full ranges of motion and stuff like that, you're kind of getting full stretches on a lot of areas like that in general. So unless I just feel like my body's like feeling off, like oh, my hamstrings are kind of tight after like, you know, doing a bunch of deadlifts and hamstring focused work, then, you know, I may stretch then, but otherwise I'm good. All right guys, so that is it for this video. I know it was long, but I didn't want to do like a part 1, part 2 this time. I just wanted to get it all in one go. So for those of you who stayed and, you know, watched the entire thing, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you all once again who actually took the time to ask these questions. Like I said, if you want to be able, you know, get your question answered in the next Q&A, because I did pretty much answer everything. Like I excluded a couple, like some of you who asked like 3 questions, I only answered 1 of them, but I got to each individual as far as like the questions they asked. But yeah, that's it for the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you did. If you're not, leave a comment down below. Let me know what I can do to get better. Like the video, share, subscribe. Keep it simple, specific, scientific. I'll catch y'all later.